Good evening, everyone. The title of tonight's talk is The Formula for Worldly and Spiritual Success. I'm sure that everybody would welcome such a talk because most people like the best of both worlds. The Buddha has two standards. He has double standards. When he talks to monks and nuns, he will tell them to strive hard so that they can be liberated from suffering, if possible, in this very life. Often he would remind them not to be complacent, even with the lower stages of enlightenment. Even if one were to become a Sotapanna, a stream enterer, a Sagadagami, a once returner, or an Anagami, a non-returner, one should not rest content with that, but should keep on striving until one attains total liberation from samsara, the round of birth and death. On the other hand, when he addressed lay people, he would tell them to do more good, do merits, do dana, make offerings, observe your precepts, live a moral life, so that after death you can be reborn in better circumstances, especially up in heaven. But I guess nowadays things have changed a lot. It has been about 2,500 years since the Buddha's time, and lay people may have more time than they had before to practice and study the Dhamma. In fact, there are quite a number of scholars in the West now who are so much more well-versed, better experts in the field of Buddhist scriptural study and understanding than the many thousands of monks that we can see in traditional Buddhist countries like Thailand, Burma, and Sri Lanka, or even China. Recently, in the course of preparing for one of my talks, I read through a PhD thesis written by a Burmese Sayadaw. And I also read another thesis written by an Englishman who is now a well-known professor. And I can see such a great difference in the level of intellectual investigation and maturity of thinking. Whatever it is, nowadays, as I said, because things have changed, lay people can now opt to do Buddhist studies in a university and spend a lot of their time studying and practicing the Buddha Dhamma. There are also lay people who may not have so much time or interest or inclinations to do so much theoretical study, but they may have the interest in wanting to put the Dhamma into practice so that they can find more peace, contentment and happiness in life. After all, the Buddha talks about suffering and about how to attain the cessation of suffering. So when people get into trouble, they become very depressed, get caught up in depression. They encounter traumatic experiences in their life. That's when they start to look for a solution, how to get out of that suffering. That's when they come running to the temple, to meditation centers, to find a way out. And that's when they see the Dhamma, they can experience the Dhamma, and they can appreciate the Dhamma through their own personal experience. In fact, the best teacher is suffering. The Four Noble Truths that the Buddha talked about says that the first noble truth is that there is suffering, and that noble truth has to be fully understood. The second noble truth is that of craving, and that has to be abandoned. The third noble truth is that of cessation of suffering, and that is to be realized. But how do you do that? How do you abandon craving, and how do you realize the cessation of suffering? That is found in the fourth noble truth, which is developing the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. So, in order to let go of craving, you have to understand suffering fully. Suffer, 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 so that you have no choice but to look at the cause of suffering. And then when you find that, oh, it's really because of my clinging, my attachment that's causing me all this suffering, then that is wisdom, and then you let go. But in order to come to that stage of letting go, you have to walk the Noble Eightfold Path. But that's not what we're talking about tonight. Maybe another talk. In the course of telling the monks how to walk this Noble Eightfold Path to be free from suffering, the Buddha used many different methods from many different perspectives and different angles in order to suit individual inclinations and temperaments. Out of these many diverse teachings, I've extracted one of them, which is applicable not only to the spiritual pursuit of total liberation from suffering, achieving success in liberation from samsara, but it can also be applicable to worldly pursuits and bring you success as well. That's why I call this talk tonight a formula for worldly and spiritual success. It is only a formula. There could be many other formulas that could work for different people, but this is only one out of the many that I'm making available to you. This is based on the teachings of the 4 Iddhipadas. In English, that is translated as the 4 bases of success or accomplishment. What are the causes and conditions that can bring success, that can make you accomplished in what you want to do? In Pali, Iddhi usually means power, psychic powers. And Chattaro Iddhipada refers to the means or the basis for developing power in your spiritual development. But I prefer to translate the word Iddhi here to mean success, although it can also mean power. Yeah, one of its meanings is success or accomplishment. I have come up with an acronym for these 4 bases of success. And you can see here that there are 2 CVs. Now, what is a CV? If you're applying for a job, you will know there's curriculum vitae, right? So it's easy for you to remember. And there are 2 S's there. These 2 S's are an addition. These are not found in the 4 bases of success themselves, but I have imported it from somewhere else. Copy and paste. Okay. So in Pali, the first C means or stands for Chanda. I will give you the English equivalent soon. The second stands for Virya. The third stands for Chitta. The fourth stands for Vimamsa. These are the 4 that are mentioned in the suttas. But for Mimamsa, I have a subcategory which I call Sati and Sambhajanya. In English, this means first we have desire, then we have effort, then mind, investigation, mindfulness, and finally full awareness. You notice that you can also get an acronym from the English translation, right? They make it easier for you to remember this formula. I have come up with another more catchy acronym. The first one, instead of desire, I call it passionate enthusiasm. Because in order to be successful in life or in any endeavor, whether spiritual or worldly, you need to have a very passionate enthusiasm to motivate you. In Chinese, we say, "唔是講愛做呢，特別堅做." It's only when you have this passionate enthusiasm that will drive you to realize your goal. Now, it's not enough just to want to do, you really must want very badly to do it. You must be really very enthusiastic about it. Of course, I'm sure that you all have heard of The Secret, the law of attraction, popularized by Charlie Chia. The law of attraction works on this basis too, If you really want something, you think about it day and night, even when you're sleeping. Yeah? That's what passionate enthusiasm is. You have to be so obsessed with it that you attract the energy to accomplish your goal. The second is perseverance, which is not just putting in effort, but as you try to implement your project, you're sure to meet with ups and downs. There will be obstacles, right? When you have obstacles, you don't just give up easily. You have to persevere, persist with your efforts. The next one is S stands for single-mindedness. Just now, it was just mind, chitta, mind. And you may wonder, how does mind come into this formula? It's a bit difficult, when you use the English word mind to translate chitta. If you translate it into Hokkien, it makes very good sense. Usim jo. There is a mind, usim jo. Yeah? So, single-mindedness. You are focused in what you want to do. There's a commitment to the time and the effort that you are putting in. Because if one is not focused, then one has got too many things on one's mind, too many projects. Then your energy becomes dissipated. Your attention becomes distracted. And you may not be able to focus your time and energy and resources to realize that particular goal that you have such a passionate enthusiasm for. Right? So single-mindedness or commitment is also very important. It's a part of the formula for success. And then finally we have investigation. Now, investigation is something that needs to be done at every stage. And although this formula is presented in a linear fashion, it is by no means linear. It doesn't come step by step. Reality is not as simple as we always conceive it to be. In fact, these factors are all interactive. Even when you first have this passionate enthusiasm to do something, investigation must come in. You must investigate first to see whether that passionate enthusiasm is worth following up or not. Right? And then when you meet with obstacles, you have also got to investigate whether, those obstacles are for real or they are just minor or blessings in disguise. You will have to reevaluate the progress of your endeavor in the course of trying to achieve it. Sometimes in the middle of an endeavor, you might be forced to abandon it because circumstances are not conducive to its fulfillment. And that could also be a blessing in disguise. Then something else could crop up and you could get success in another field. Right? So things need to be looked at from a wider perspective. But how do we investigate? That's why I included two things for investigation, which is mindfulness and awareness. Right? So in order to investigate, we must have mindfulness and we must have awareness, which I will talk about soon. Now look at this formula. Now you have an acronym which is more catchy and easier to remember. So if somebody would ask you, you attended Bhante's talk this morning, so what do you talk about? What's the formula for success? What would you say? Yeah, Pepsi Ma. Right, so you won't forget this. Okay. Now, this whole formula, like I said before, is applicable to worldly and spiritual endeavors. Let's look at it from the worldly point of view. Like I said just now, if you have a very passionate enthusiasm of wanting to do something, then you have to investigate and see whether it's feasible or not. And then, after you have decided that it's going to be feasible, then you meet with obstacles in life, you must persevere with obstacles, and you must also investigate, whether those obstacles are real obstacles or just minor obstacles that can be overcome. And if you're very focused on that particular project and you neglect other things, you're putting all your eggs in one basket, that could also be dangerous. Yeah? So you need also investigation to see how much of your commitment you want to invest in this project. So they are all interrelated. Now I want to talk more about mindfulness and awareness, because these two factors will determine the quality of your investigation. How does one investigate? One investigates with mindfulness and awareness. Mindfulness is an English translation of sati, whereas full awareness, or awareness here, is a translation of the Pali word sambhajanya. Okay, now I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the word sati. You have heard of Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, Sanghanusati, right? Buddhanusati means repeatedly recollecting the Buddha, thinking about the Buddha, remembering the Buddha. How do you remember the Buddha? In terms of his qualities. Then Dhammanusati means repeatedly remembering or recollecting the virtues of the Dhamma. Right? So when you see this word, Buddhanusati, it comprises three parts. Buddha, Anu, and Sati. Anu means repeated, and Sati means mindfulness or recollection. We can have the word Maranasati, which is remembering death. Reminding yourself every now and then, that death could occur anytime. So actually, Sati means remembrance. It also means recollection. And it also means to remind yourself to do something. You've also heard of the very popular Anapanasati, right? Anapana means breathing in and breathing out. And Sati means to remember that you're breathing in and breathing out. To remind yourself to be aware of your breath. Now, whether you are aware that you're breathing or not, you're breathing anyway. Right? Even when you're sleeping, you're breathing. So, what's the big deal about Anapanasati? The big deal is remembering to watch the breath. Most of the time, you don't even know that you're breathing, unless you get into breathing difficulties. Yeah. Right, so sati means reminding yourself, remembering, reminding, recollecting. Sati also means remembering instructions. Right? For example, you come to the talk today and you listen to this talk. If it's going to benefit you anyway, you must remember what it's all about. Right? And then when you go out to the world and you want to put it into practice to apply what you have learned, you must remember the instructions, remember the formula, Pepsi, Ma, and then also remind yourself to put it into practice. One thing is to remember the instructions. Secondly, you have to remind yourself to put it into practice. Mindfulness also means retrospection. Looking back at what has just happened. Looking at all these 4 R's, you will see that they all have one thing in common. They are all taking a past object, isn't it? You remember something in the past, you recollect something in the past, you remind yourself of something that you have heard about in the past. And retrospection means to look back at what has happened or what you have just thought. And yet nowadays, sati or mindfulness is equated with present moment awareness. So how can that be? How can the past be the present? Right? But there is a reason why the Buddha used the word sati sambhajanya together. Sati is remembering. Sambhajanya is awareness, full awareness. So how does this work? First of all, we need to ask ourselves, what do you mean by past, present and future? Yeah? What is the past? How past is past? When you talk about the past, are you referring to your past lives? Previous lives? Or are you referring to your childhood? That's also the past. Yeah? Or years ago? Or even last year? And you can also refer to something that happened last week, yesterday, last night. These are all in the past, right? But it's getting nearer. Okay? And this morning, an hour ago, is still the past. A moment ago is still the past. The very moment I say present is really in the past. Right? So just now is also the past. So where is the present? And when you look at this concept of time, past, present and future, you can either regard it in two perspectives. Either there's no such thing as the present, or there's only the present and no such thing as the past. It depends on how you look at it. Right? So, I hope now you can appreciate why the Buddha used the word sati sampajanya. Yeah, because sati means looking back at the past. And this is very, very important in the process of investigation. Now let's look at the formula, Pepsi Ma. The first one, PE, is passionate enthusiasm, right? You have this idea that sprouts in your mind. You want to do something. In order to investigate, you have to look back at this idea that has popped up in your mind. Yeah? But looking back is not enough. You need to do more than just looking back. You have to be fully aware of what is happening, of the implications and the consequences of that idea that has arisen in you. So, to recap, mindfulness means all these things, which are taking a past object. It is also present moment awareness in the sense that it's looking back at the immediate past. What has just happened is the immediate past. This is particularly very obvious when you are watching your emotions and your thoughts. The moment you are aware that you're angry, it means the anger has already occurred. Right? The moment you're watching your thoughts, it means that your thoughts have already occurred and you are just following right behind. Now let's look at sampajanya, awareness. What's the difference between sati and sampajanya? I've got two very interesting similes. One is of a survey assistant and a survey analyst. So sati can be equated to a survey assistant. What does he do? He just collects these forms and go around and distribute it to people. And people will just tick, 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 and then he will collect back this form, right? That's all he does. He doesn't analyze, because that's not his job. Who does the analysis? It is a survey analyst. After he's collected all this data, then he will present it to the survey analyst, and that person will analyze the data. So they are actually interdependent, right? The survey assistant collecting all this data would not be able to put it to any use because he doesn't have the knowledge to be able to analyze and process the information. Yeah. On the other hand, the survey analyst would not be able to process anything if the survey assistant didn't give him the data. Right? So, each of them has its own role to play. But they must work together in order to be productive, to come out with results. And that's why mindfulness is so important. You have to, first of all, look back, whether it's a distant past or whether it's an immediate past, and then mindfulness finishes its job. Then full awareness takes over. You have to be fully aware of what's happening in that past object, in that thought, in that idea. Right? But how are you to be fully aware? Why is it called full awareness and not just bare awareness? Well, there's also another thing. Many people tend to equate mindfulness with bare awareness. Sampajanya is not just bare awareness. It's full awareness. Sometimes it's translated as clear comprehension. So, sampajanya means full awareness of the object according to 4 criteria. And what are they? Looking at your enthusiasm about something that you want to do. And you have to evaluate in terms of these 4 criteria. First of all, you got to ask yourself, is it beneficial? If you find that it's not beneficial, then stop there. You don't have to go to the next step anymore. For example, if applying to a worldly situation, You are an ordinary member of BUBS. And then you have this fantastic idea that arose in your mind one day. Instead of going to SBS so far, why not let's start a local forest meditation center? Right? Then we don't have to go all the way to SBS and waste our effort and energy traveling and then resting for another few hours to start our retreat. Why not we do it somewhere nearby? Why not let's do it in Taman Tun, Bukit Kiara, nice forest there. Would it be beneficial? It would be, isn't it? Many people would benefit. They don't have to go all the way up to SBS to meditate. It's just very close to nature, so it's beneficial. But there's another thing. Is it appropriate? Is it suitable? Or is it inappropriate? Why is it inappropriate? Now you have to consider various factors involved. You could say, well, it's appropriate. It benefits people and it's suitable because there's a forest there and then it's nearby the urban people. Then the next thing you have to look at is whether it is relevant to you or not. You are just an ordinary member. You're not an executive member. You're not a member of the committee, right? And how much weight does your suggestion carry? Is it relevant to you as an ordinary member? Is it relevant to you as a member of BUBS or not? Is it one of BUBS' objectives, to set up a forest meditation center? Yeah, so when you look at it this way, then you might find that it's not really relevant. BUBS doesn't have any objectives of setting up a forest meditation center. So you might just drop the idea. But you may go one step further. You might say, okay, even if it's not relevant, maybe if I have enough influence, I could go and influence the executive committee. And when they're influenced, they might change the constitution and then include that inside. That's actually what happened when we started Sasana Buddhist Sanctuary. That was back in 1999. We had a meeting in the Klang Valley in PJ, calling representatives from various Buddhist societies and organizations. And we were trying to decide whether we should set up a separate new Buddhist society or we should park Sasana Buddhist Sanctuary under an existing society. So we thought that the aims and objectives of Sasana Buddhist Sanctuary, which is primarily to train Theravada Buddhist monks, would not gain the approval of the Registrar of Societies. So we decided, better park it under an existing society. So in Taiping, we have a Taiping Insight Meditation Society, and we decided to create SBS as a special project of Taiping Insight Meditation Society. But then, it's not in its aims and objectives. It's not one of its aims and objectives to start a monk training center or to start a education center. We had a call for an AGM, and then during the AGM, we amended the constitution. Now we put in quite a number of things in an oblique way so that ROS could approve the amendment. And after that was how Sasana Buddhist Sanctuary started, parked under Taiping Insight Meditation Society. So you can also make it relevant. But then after that, there's another thing that you need to ask. Is it going to be realistic? Coming back to this idea of setting up a forest meditation center in Taman Tun, at Bukit Kiara. Is it going to be realistic? Do you think the authorities are going to allow you to set up a Buddhist center in Taman Tun? Yeah? So it's not realistic. So you have to shelf the idea. Right? So that's how Sambhajanya works. Sambhajanya works by evaluating what your mind has looked back at. Any idea that you have. So this is very appropriate in all circumstances, in all steps from the formula for success. So when it comes to facing obstacles while you are trying to accomplish your goal, then you can also apply investigation. Look back at obstacles that you are facing and investigate them according to these 4 criteria. So this can work in any situation. Now let's look at it from a spiritual point of view. How do we apply Sambhajanya? Well, these 4 criteria were actually suggested by the commentaries. They are not found exactly in the Pali Suttas, but it has been very useful for me and for many people who accept these 4 aspects of Sambhajanya. Okay, let's say you are participating in an intensive meditation retreat. Then after a few days of settling down, in your sitting, you have some interesting experiences. You get very peaceful and calm and tranquil. Your body feels very light, like you're floating in the air. And then there's this bright light in front of you, making you feel so ecstatic about it. And then the thought arose in you, wow, this is really great. This is the Dhamma. How can I get my spouse, who is not a Buddhist, to meditate so that he or she can also experience the same peace and happiness that I have experienced? Okay, so this thought arose in you. So as a Vipassana yogi, then you watch this thought. You actually apply mindfulness by looking back at this thought, right? And then after that, you have to decide what you want to do. Are you going to pursue the thought? Are you going to sit down there and start to plan how you're going to lure your spouse into Buddhism so that he or she can start meditation? So that thought, is it beneficial or not? It's beneficial, isn't it? It benefits you, and then of course you want to share good things with people you love. So it's beneficial. Is it appropriate? Well, you could keep on thinking, well, I have to look for a proper time when he's in a good mood, the time and the occasion. How can I make him into a good mood? Maybe cook him his favorite dish, take him or her out for dinner and have some nice talk. After that you open up his heart chakra, make him more receptive, and then maybe I could suggest it in an oblique way. Or other ways, like putting CDs or things on the table. Various ways, not to say directly. So that would be appropriate. And then you keep on thinking, the next step, will it be relevant? Okay, relevant in the sense that you are now a yogi. What is the job of a yogi? A yogi in an intensive retreat is to mind his or her own business, to be antisocial. You're not supposed to socialize with fellow yogis. You mind your own business, and your duty as a Vipassana yogi is just to observe objects arising and passing away without getting involved in their contents. Right? So is it relevant to pursue this thought? If you pursue this thought in your meditation, it's gone, finished. All your lights and all your activity will all go. Then you get involved in, sitting, planning a Dhamma talk with your spouse. So there's no more meditation for you. So when you come to this point, that it's not relevant, so you just abandon it. Okay, you don't even have to go on to the next level. So this is how it was meant to be in terms of spiritual application. And being realistic from the Buddhist spiritual point of view means that it has to be according to the true nature of reality. If you're a Vipassana yogi, you're just supposed to observe phenomena that appear in your field of awareness in terms of impermanence, suffering, not self, and conditionality. That's all. Right? If you don't see these things, that means you're not realistic. From the Vipassana yogi's point of view. But in a worldly sense, you need to also assess or evaluate your thoughts. Whatever thoughts that you have, like I said earlier, even though it's a very enticing thought about doing something good for society, good for the community, you're very passionate about it. And you have to find out whether it's realistic or not. Like just now, we gave this example of setting up a forest meditation center in Tamantun. So realistic means according to present circumstances, according to the conditions at the moment. Will your idea fit into that? So when we talk about being realistic, we have to understand that there are different levels of truth. On the one hand, as a yogi, you are evaluating things from an ultimate level. But when you come back to worldly life, you cannot use the same standards. You have to change your standards to a more conventional level. So we shouldn't be too rigid about what we mean by being realistic. What is reality? Reality is relative in the relative world, although it is ultimate in the ultimate world. And you have to adjust your standards accordingly. When we talk about spiritual and worldly success, maybe I didn't define the word spiritual and worldly at the beginning. So in some of my talks at the end, during Q&A, some people will ask me, what do you mean by spiritual success? Now, that's a very interesting question. Okay, what is worldly success? Worldly success refers to all those things that most people are running after. Job promotion, climbing up the corporate ladder, getting a good pay, getting good fringe benefits, getting fame and recognition, status, power, riches, good relationship with people in the family and otherwise. So these are worldly. Spiritual success refers to your state of mind and subsequently your conduct, your verbal and your bodily conduct, because everything stems from the mind. If you're able to take care of your mind, then your verbal and bodily conduct should naturally conform to the wholesome states of mind that you are developing. So by spiritual success, I mean being able to reduce unwholesome states of mind, like desire, attachment, obsession, disappointment, frustration, anger, impatience, depression, and then being deluded by the apparent form of things that you perceive. I will talk about this shortly. Actually, this is very important. It means also the converse, that there is an increase in wholesome states of mind. You become more generous. You're less stingy. You're not so much attached, not only to worldly things, but to people as well, to relationships, to views and opinions, expectations. You become more understanding, more forgiving, kinder, gentler, and your precepts become more and more well established. It becomes an automatic thing, in your mind. When you encounter certain occasions when you have to break the precept, then, the thing will arise in your mind, hey, I'm observing the precept. You're able to practice mindfulness and full awareness. You're aware of this urge that has arisen in your mind. Since you're able to look back at it and apply sampajanya, then before you carry out that intention, you would have made your decision, whether it's worth pursuing or not. Remember, the first verse in the Dhammapada says that mind is the forerunner of all things. The mind is the leader. Everything is impelled by the mind. In our Pali text, we have this word manomaya, that everything is created by the mind. But according to Venerable Ananda Jyoti, an English monk who's a scholar, after he made a comparison with other existing Dhammapadas in other languages, he found that it's better to use mano-java rather than manomaya. Because to use it as manomaya, or created by the mind, he says that it's not quite Buddhistic. Mano-java makes more sense, because mano-java means impelled by the mind. All things are impelled by the mind. So whatever thoughts that you have, whatever speech that you make, whatever actions that you do, they are all preceded by intention. Right? So if you are able to practice mindfulness and full awareness, you are able to catch the intention, look back at the immediate past, and then calmly and objectively apply full awareness. Evaluate it according to these 4 criteria. Then you can be sure that you will not pursue unwholesome intentions. Right? Neither will you speak things that will have negative or unwholesome consequences. And similarly with action. Now, so study sampajanya. I want to talk also about delusion. When you practice these, then spiritual success occurs when all these wholesome qualities arise. You become more forgiving, more understanding. You have less attachments. not only to material things, but to views, opinions, and so forth. And I said also that you have less delusion. Delusion means what? Delusion means not understanding the true nature of your thoughts. How your thoughts are structured, what your thoughts are based on. To give you an example, which I've been giving many times during my tour here, and some of you who have listened to it might find it a bit boring. Yeah? In fact, one day, soon after I started my tour, one lady said she's been attending my talks, and it's all revision and revision and revision. But that's what the Buddha talked about, isn't it? Throughout his 45 years, what did he talk about? Not Four Noble Truths, Noble Eightfold Path, Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta. That's all he talked about, from various angles and using different similes. So this one I'm going to tell you about is, I don't know whether it's true or not, probably it's fictitious, but anyway, it's a very good story. I read it in my email when I was spring cleaning my attachments. So it's a story about an English couple, and it's giving us an account of their diary entries for one day. So this lady wrote in her diary, "I'm so devastated today. My husband just wouldn't pay attention to me at breakfast time. He would look so depressed. And when I tried to talk to him, he just ignored me. And when I asked him, do I have anything to do with this? Did I cause you this, depression, or did I make you upset in any way?" The husband said, "No, there's nothing to do with you, But he was totally depressed the whole day, seems very dejected and refused to talk to her. And so this woman wrote, maybe there's another woman in his life. What does she have that I don't have? What can she give that I cannot give? There must be something wrong. I must really have a heart-to-heart talk with him before we sleep tonight." And so she was thinking about this the whole day, how she's going to approach the situation. Finally, the husband came back in the evening, had dinner with her, and didn't even say anything. After dinner, he slumped in front of the TV, looked at the TV and fell asleep. So she didn't have a time to talk to him, and she cried the whole night. Poor woman. Then let's look at the man's diary entry. What did he say? He said, "God damn it. How can United Manchester have lost the match?" I see Manchester United. Englishmen are crazy about football. To them, it's like life and death. The interesting thing is, look at the woman. The woman had already asked him, and he said that it's got nothing to do with her. And probably he wouldn't be able to make her understand his feelings. And so he preferred to keep quiet and suffer himself. But this woman decided to believe her thought. Believe her thought based on a false assumption. Assuming that, there's another woman in his life. Now don't just laugh at them. Look at your own life. How many times has this happened to you? How many times has this happened to you? That's simply because you're not mindful. We do not have mindfulness and full awareness. We were not mindful of our thoughts. You did not look back at your thoughts to see whether your thoughts are worth believing or not. Like I said, whatever we think, speak, or do is preceded by an intention. Right? Something crops up first. You have to watch that intention, you have to watch that preliminary thought, and then evaluate it before you want to pursue it or not. Right? Because that woman did not actually investigate her thoughts. She simply believed her own assumptions, which are actually totally false. Then, because you believe your assumptions, you believe your thought, keep on proliferating it, you're causing suffering to yourself, isn't it? So that's actually where our suffering comes from. It comes all from the mind. What we can perceive through our senses are actually raw data. You see colors, you hear sound, you smell smells. If you've never smelled something before, you wouldn't even know how to call it. And then you taste. A Westerner who has never tasted durian before, wouldn't know what it is. And body feelings. sensations in your body. Sometimes, when you sleep at night and you have a nightmare, it's because there are certain bodily changes in your body. Maybe a gust of wind blew over and you were not properly covered by a blanket, and that caused some physical sensations. And then immediately the mind would react and think that there is a yakka, or a demon trying to pull your leg or trying to ride on your chest. So these are all perceptions, creations of the mind. And if you don't arrest them, then you create more suffering for yourself. Spiritual success means you are able to reduce the frequency of such occurrences. Reduce your delusion. Simply being led by, your thoughts which are based on false assumptions or even unrealistic expectations or wrong beliefs. If you really investigate your thoughts, you will know that all your thoughts are actually based on these three things only. You see how your thoughts are based on? On your belief system, and based on your assumptions, based on your expectations. And if these are inaccurate, false, unrealistic, and then you keep on proliferating your thoughts, then you are asking for trouble. And so if you're able to practice mindfulness and full awareness, you'll be able to see all these thoughts coming and going. You'll be able to understand the true nature of these thoughts, that they are based on these things. But it doesn't mean that because they are based on these things, you stop thinking. You still have to distinguish between idle mode and productive mode. And all of us in this world have to make decisions based on thoughts that are based on assumptions and expectations. Right? But as long as you understand that these assumptions and expectations are not absolute in nature, right? They are relative. You have to look at the probability of how realistic they are or how accurate they are. And then you have to be prepared for things not going according to what you expect. So when you have that expectation in you, that preparation in your mind, that things need not necessarily turn out the way that you want them to, then you won't feel so disappointed. Right? When things are not the way you want them to be. But this involves mindfulness and full awareness. You need to look at your mind. You need to understand your thoughts. And most importantly, don't simply believe every thought that you have. Investigate them with sampajanya according to the 4 criteria before you pursue or proliferate. From the conventional point of view means, are your expectations realistic? Are your assumptions accurate? Is your belief system really true? Right? For example, we are Buddhists. We believe in rebirth. We believe in the law of karma. But it's only a belief, If something big, a misfortune happens to you, for example, a very good friend of yours suddenly cheats you a few 100,000, in a business venture, then you will feel very dejected. You will feel very disappointed, isn't it? Because of the trust that you have invested in him. So first, it may be very difficult for you to accept. But sometimes, because you're a good Buddhist, you reflect on it and you say, well, probably it's because of past karma. I cheated him before in the past, and now I have to repay my karmic debt. So something right? But it's only a belief, A Christian also could do the same thing. A Christian could say, well, it's God's will and it's God's way of testing my patience. Right? That is also a belief that's based on the belief that, God is there to test him or her. And your belief that you could have cheated him in the past life and now you have to repay the karmic debt is also a belief. But this belief has its uses. It helps you to let go, helps you to be accepting, helps you to get consolation and solace. So, but we must remember there is only a belief, that's not the real thing. Yeah. Sometimes we cannot just have too much faith in our beliefs. We must have sati sampajanya, mindfulness and full awareness to make the discretion and to draw the line. Okay, so I hope that you will be able to remember this very simple and catchy formula. If somebody asks you, Bhante's talk today, what's the formula? What are you going to say? Okay. So make sure that you remember, remind yourself to put into practice, and I wish you all the success in the worldly and spiritual endeavors. Yes, are there any questions from anyone?
Bhante, can we say to a certain extent that everything is created by the mind, from opportunities to physical possession, even to goals or whatever?
Good question. Can we say to a certain extent that everything is created by the mind? There is actually in Buddhism, there's one school called the mind-only school. It's a sort of a Mahayana school. They say that there's this classic Zen question. Two Zen monks were talking about. One Zen monk asked the other one, okay, you see the flag moving. Is it the flag moving in the wind, or is it your mind that is moving? Well, what do you think? Like I said earlier, whatever our five senses receive, can register, are only raw data. It's how your mind interprets it that will determine the quality of your life. Like all the ones and zeros that you key into your computer, the computer will not be able to recognize the language. It is totally useless. So if our software is not well programmed, is faulty, then you look at things from a negative point of view, then they will affect the quality of your life, isn't it? Two persons can actually react very, very differently to a particular situation. Give you an example. I heard in Dr. Chan Kayin's Dhamma talk that when Chief Reverend was told by his doctor that he had cancer, that he had to undergo therapy, and the Chief said, no chemotherapy for me. Then the doctor said, why? I don't want to lose my hair. So it's typical of him, he's not really bothered by that. But if somebody else, an ordinary layperson were told, he will be devastated. The first thing will be denial. Must be a mix-up in the x-ray, or the scan. Cannot be me, I've been taking organic food, I've been doing all these things, how can I get cancer? Impossible. So, you see how you react to a situation depends so much on your programming. In a sense, it's so correct to say it's all a creation of the mind. How does your mind create? We are actually products of past conditioning and present circumstances. If I were to say we are products of past conditioning, full stop, then you become fatalistic. So actually, present circumstances also shape our past conditioning to some extent. There are certain things that due to past conditioning that we cannot change. For example, your appearance. Although Michael Jackson can turn from black to white. That's an exception, okay? Nowadays people can dye their hair from black to blonde or purple or orange or whatever. But there are certain things you can't change, And yet there are things that you can change. If you say that you are a product of a past conditioning, then there's no point striving for liberation. And yet when you say strive for liberation, and the Buddhists say there's no self, then who is it that's striving for liberation? That's also another question. So, there's actually no one there. It's just conditions, conditioning, conditions. And conditions are changing all the time. The person or the so-called person who is striving has actually been conditioned by Dhamma talks, by reading books, and conditioned also by the circumstances of suffering that he or she has faced. A lot of people are brought into Buddhist meditation because of suffering. Suffering is the best teacher. If you don't have enough suffering, you wouldn't come to meditate. You'll probably be enjoying yourself in a disco or social parties.
They talk on the path to worldly or spiritual success. As opposed for monks, he lost the path for spiritual success, and for an entrepreneur, businessman, he lost the path for worldly success. But for the vast majority of the people like us, we are on two paths at the same time. Is that so? Is there a conflict? Or does that mean we are only halfway successful in both?
That's a good question. There's for monks, they walk the path for spiritual success. For entrepreneurs, they walk the path for worldly success. But for the majority of us, we are like halfway. So how do we walk the path? If you practice sati sampajanya, mindfulness and full awareness, you yourself will be able to make the discretion. You will have the wisdom to know what is enough. But there's one interesting verse in the Dhammapada. It says, Anya hi labupanisa, anya nibbanagami. You know what it says? The path to worldly gains is one, and the path to nibbana is another. Well, like I said, even if nibbana were offered to you in a plate, you will not be ready to receive it. But you can still walk the path towards nibbana. Yeah? And use your own discretion to apply conventional layman standards when you are in a conventional world, and then spiritual standards when you are on retreat. Don't make the mistake of coming out from an intensive retreat and still continuing to act like a yogi. You won't be able to operate, and you'll neither get spiritual nor worldly success. Yes. Okay?
Bhante, if we cannot remember, say, our past life, what we have done, why we should worry about future?
Okay, the question is, since we cannot remember our past life, what's the point of worrying about the future? Can you remember your childhood? Can, isn't it? But you can't remember all your childhood, can you? You can remember fragments of it, important events. But it doesn't really matter whether you remember your past life or not. What is important is the present moment. Just now I was telling you, looking at this concept of time, it depends on how you look at it. Either there's no such thing as the present, or that there's only the present. But the present is a conglomeration of past conditioning and present circumstances. And what you do in the present will actually be conditions for what's going to happen to you in the future. As Buddhists, we believe in the law of karma. As Buddhists, we believe in rebirth. It's a belief, like I said just now, it cannot be proven. But when you do something wholesome, we believe that it will give wholesome results. But actually, even if you don't have that belief, when you do something wholesome, you feel good. And that itself is a benefit. When you do something bad, unwholesome, if you are observant enough, without even saying or doing it, even the unwholesome thought arising in you, you will actually feel very unpleasant. Actually the body feels miserable because of the unwholesome thought that has arisen. Neurologists or neuroscientists have already verified the fact that our minds and our bodies are very intricately connected. Any thought, whether it's wholesome or unwholesome, will stimulate the body to produce certain biochemicals. And those biochemicals will be permeated throughout your whole body, and that's when your bodily sensations are felt. That's why in English we have this word emotions. Emotions is actually a combination of mental feelings and physical sensations. Right? So it's so important, like this brother also said, everything is a creation of your mind. How your mind is programmed will determine the quality of your life. Whether or not we can remember our past lives is actually quite irrelevant. What is important is be able to do those things that can improve our quality of life. Okay, look at it this way. If you feel that you're more forgiving, more understanding, more gentle, and more patient, do you think that will be good for you? Is it a good feeling? Do you think that will also create good feelings among people around you? It would, right? What happens if you are angry, very bad-tempered, and then also have a lot of greed and desire for things animate and inanimate? What sort of energy does that create? See? You yourself also feel miserable, and you will also create miserable energy around you and affect other people. So, knowing past life is not really that important. What is important is be in the present and to do good things and feel good about it.
Bhante, how to note the craving and abandon them?
How to note the craving and abandon them? Okay, that's a good question. At the beginning of my talk, I mentioned the Four Noble Truths. The first one is the Noble Truth of suffering, which is to be fully understood. The second one is the noble truth of craving, which is to be abandoned. Not the truth to be abandoned, but the craving is to be abandoned. The third one is the cessation of suffering, which is to be realized. But how do you achieve that? By walking the Noble Eightfold Path. Right? In the Noble Eightfold Path, we have got 8 path factors. The first one is right view. So you need to have an intellectual understanding of what Buddhist teachings are all about, as well as the faith to believe in them, because you have not experienced them yet, you accept them out of faith. Okay, one of the things that you accept, basically, you accept the law of karma. Secondly, you accept also that everything is anicca, dukkha, anatta. Everything is impermanent, suffering, and non-self. Initially, you do not see that, you just accept that out of faith. Everything that your mind can perceive through the 6 senses, all these worldly objects are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and there's no permanent, unchanging entity or self behind it all. And why? Because everything is due to conditionality, due to cause and effect. That is right view. When you have that right view, then that will help you in your next path factor, which is right thought. If you look at our lives, our emotional lives, actually there's no one out there who can make you angry or make you upset. There's no one out there who is making you upset. It's you yourself. It's your interpretation or your perception of what's happening outside there that creates the emotional turmoil within you. If you look at your own life, that's what happens, especially with someone whom you are close to. When you see some body language, that exhibits unpleasantness or displeasure, sometimes you begin to suspect, is it because of me or what, and then your mind you say, well, if it's because of what I said this morning, that's unfair, Why can't I say that? You should accept me for what I am. I see. All these things are going in your mind. But if you really want to be free of the suffering, there are 2 things you can do. One thing is, go and approach that person and ask, be upfront. I see that you're upset. Is it because of what I did? Very simple. And the moment the person explains, oh no, something else is bothering me, immediately your suffering is gone. Right? But if you don't, and you just keep it in your heart, and you keep churning in your heart, you'll be suffering the whole day. And you'll get bigger and bigger. So, another thing you could do is, if you do not have the opportunity to approach that person, to be upfront with him or her, if you watch your thoughts, then you will understand how that thought arose. That thought arose because you saw something, and your mind interpreted it. Right? You are making an assumption. Could it be because I said something? It is only an assumption, and you have not verified it. So, don't simply believe all your thoughts. You must question your thoughts. See what your thoughts are based on. Most of our thoughts, if not all our thoughts, they are based on 3 main things. 1, expectation. 2, assumption. 3, belief. These 3 only. And in these 3, your expectation is unrealistic. Your assumption is inaccurate. Your belief is wrong. Yeah? And then you keep on thinking, your thoughts based on these 3 things, then you're creating suffering for yourself. Isn't it? So to be able to see this clearly, you must have sati sampajanya. You must have mindfulness. Look back at your thought to see exactly what it is. What it's all about. Its contents, to understand how it comes about, its structure, the causes and conditions behind that thought. When you see a thought, when you are used to looking back at the immediate past, then you have a better choice, a better option. Because you can see whether that thought, that intention, that beginning thought is worth pursuing or not. Is it beneficial, appropriate, relevant, realistic? If you find that it's not, then forget it. Stop thinking. What can you do? Come back to the present moment Like I said, understanding this principle that the five senses can only take present object, but your mind can take objects of the past, the present, the future, imaginings, fantasies. Now, if you don't want to get caught up in your fantasies and your preconceived ideas that are making you suffer, stop thinking. How do you stop thinking? Change the subject. Come back to the present moment. Be aware of what you're doing, particularly your body sensations, your bodily activity. Okay, so coming back to the Noble Eightfold Path. If you have this right view, everything is conditioned. Everything that you can perceive through your mind, worldly things that you can perceive through your mind are all anicca, dukkha, anatta. Impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self. Everything is due to causes and conditions. And because of that, then you are able to see your thoughts. Then you have right thoughts. When you have thoughts of aversion, thoughts of ill will, thoughts of wanting to cause harm to other people, thoughts of indulging in sensual pleasures, when these thoughts arise, you are able to recognize them. Right? And then you understand, you are able to distinguish between wholesome thoughts and unwholesome thoughts. Right? When you are able to do that, then automatically it goes to right speech. Then it goes to right action. Then it goes to right livelihood. Then, right effort is fourfold. Actually, it's two pairs. The first pair is about unwholesome mental states. And the second pair is about wholesome mental states. Okay, the first pair is how to prevent unwholesome mental states, negative mental states from arising. You can only prevent that if you understand their cause. Well, if you don't understand the cause, how are you going to prevent it? Right, so you need to have some wisdom. How do you know the cause? By practicing mindfulness and full awareness. Then you can see the cause. But once they have arisen, supposing you could not prevent and it arose, so the effort is you must make an effort to abandon it. Various ways of abandoning. One way that I told you about is to come back to the present moment. You abandon it. That's one way. But the other ways, like reflecting on the opposite good qualities of a person. If you're talking about how to let go of craving, then reflecting on the drawbacks of craving. What are the drawbacks or disadvantages or the consequences you can get out of craving? If you reflect on that, they could also help you to abandon it. That is the first pair, which is connected with unwholesome mental states. The second pair is connected with wholesome mental states. If wholesome mental states like mindfulness, full awareness, concentration, faith, patience, forgiveness, understanding, loving kindness, sympathetic joy have not yet arisen, how do you arouse them? And then secondly, once they have arisen, how you can maintain and develop them to fulfillment. For example, mindfulness and full awareness. Once it's arisen, you must maintain it. Keep at it, trying to be as continuous as possible throughout your daily life. So that is right effort. With right effort, then you have right mindfulness. Although I'm explaining them in a linear way, they don't actually work linear, they are all interactive. Yeah, you need to have right mindfulness first in order to have right effort. Then only you have the other things like right thought and so forth. You also need to have right mindfulness in order to have right view, to remember the teachings of anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self, and conditionality, particularly if you still lack experiential understanding. If you lack experiential understanding, you have to recall the teachings. Right? But if you have experiential understanding, this becomes inbuilt into your system. Whenever you perceive, automatically, is perceived in terms of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self, and conditionality. And so, with that, when there's right mindfulness, then the final one is right concentration. Now, concentration means having steadiness of mind. Okay, when you practice right mindfulness in terms of being aware of your present moment activities, what you're doing, or what you are feeling, or what sort of mental state you have, or how your mind is responding to the six senses, and looking at all these in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta, of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness and non-self. Then you get a steadiness of mind. You are not so easily ruffled or distracted by objects that impinge on your senses. Now you become very equanimous. Even bad things come also, you are beginning to accept them. Well, what to do is karma. What to do is conditioned phenomena. Nothing I can do. It just comes and goes. We are all products of past conditioning. And to a limited extent, we are also creators of present conditioning for future circumstances. So, while walking the Noble Eightfold Path, by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path in all its aspects, they must actually support one another, You cannot just practice one without the other. It's all part of a package. You have to do everything. If one thing is lacking, then it's not so smooth. For example, you just want to practice mindfulness. But if you don't try to observe your sila, your morality, you don't have right thoughts, you don't have right speech, or right action, or right livelihood, then when you practice mindfulness, you see that a lot of times your mind is going back to look at those bad things that you did. Regret, remorse, and all these things will come and trouble you and make you feel unsettled. But if your sila is quite clean, you try to lead a very virtuous moral life, then when you practice mindfulness and full awareness, then there's no much suffering, no remorse, no regret. Things are very smooth. So in order to let go of craving, you have to look at craving. You have to look at how much you suffer if you don't let go. Then only you can let go. As I said, suffering is the best teacher.